Welcome to Mysteries and Crime. Tonight, we descend into the depths of one of Britain's darkest stories. Fred and Rose West, a British horror story. Behind the walls of a seemingly ordinary home, unspeakable horrors unfolded. A place where innocence vanished, and evil lived undetected for years. But before we begin, here's your clue-based question. What role did the cellar play in this disturbing tale? The answer may chill you to the bone. This is the story of Fred and Rose West, a couple whose names are now etched into the darkest corners of British criminal history. From the late 1960s to the mid-1990s, their Gloucester home became the final resting place for at least 12 victims, many still unidentified. It was the 24th of February, 1994, when investigators first stepped into the seemingly ordinary home at 25 Cromwell Street in Gloucester. The West family had lived there for decades. Their neighbors described them as odd, but no one imagined what lay beneath the floorboards. After receiving a tip related to a missing teenage girl, police obtained a search warrant. They began in the garden, digging cautiously, methodically. What they uncovered would horrify even seasoned officers. Human remains, wrapped in plastic sheeting, tightly bound with rope, buried just inches beneath the surface. Forensics confirmed the first body belonged to Heather West, Fred and Rose's own daughter, last seen alive in 1987. Soon after, more remains began to emerge, each discovery more chilling than the last. As the garden yielded more secrets, investigators turned their attention inside the home. The basement, the floorboards, the walls themselves, all hid fragments of a nightmare that had unfolded in plain sight. News of the gruesome discoveries broke quickly, and soon, the once quiet street was flooded with reporters, onlookers, and families of the missing. Police immediately arrested Fred and Rose West, but the truth was only beginning to surface. The list of known victims stretches across decades, and each name carries a story lost too soon. Many of the young women shared common traits: vulnerability, instability at home, or a longing for freedom. These were not random choices. Fred and Rose allegedly preyed on those who would not be immediately missed. Heather West, their daughter, was the first officially confirmed victim. She had been outspoken about the abuse within the home. And then suddenly, she vanished in 1987. Shirley Robinson was a tenant at Cromwell Street, allegedly involved in a sexual relationship with both Fred and Rose. She was pregnant at the time of her disappearance, and her body was found buried in the backyard. Lucy Partington, a university student, went missing on December 27, 1973. She had been waiting for a bus home. Her remains were discovered in the cellar years later. Carol Ann Cooper, Therese Siegenthaler, Juanita Mott, Shirley Hubbard, Allison Chambers, all young women who vanished between 1973 and 1987. Many were hitchhiking or traveling alone when last seen. These women, allegedly lured into the house under false pretenses, met unthinkable fates within those walls. Some were kept alive for days, subjected to unspeakable torment, before they were silenced forever. Not all victims have been identified, and some families still wait for answers. Their stories and their silence demand to be remembered. Fred West was born in 1941 in Herefordshire. He came from a troubled family and allegedly suffered sexual abuse in childhood. As a young man, Fred developed a fascination with control, violence, and young women. Before meeting Rose, Fred had already been implicated in the disappearance of his former lover, Anna McFall, whose body was later found dismembered. By the late 1960s, he had been charged with theft, assault, and other offenses, yet continued to evade major scrutiny. Rosemary Letts, born in 1953, met Fred when she was just 15. She soon moved into his home, helping raise his children from a previous marriage. Within years, she became a willing participant in abuse and allegedly began assaulting young girls herself. Together, Fred and Rose created a facade of normalcy. They had children, welcomed lodgers, and ran what appeared to be a family household. But behind closed doors, they operated with calculated cruelty. According to reports, they soundproofed rooms, installed peepholes, and used restraints. They would allegedly abduct victims, imprison them, and carry out prolonged assaults before murder. Neighbors describe Rose as abrupt, Fred as unpredictable, but no one imagined the scope of the horror inside. Law enforcement would later claim that Fred confessed to more murders. Names and locations never verified. Fred and Rose, husband and wife, were not just partners in life. They were allegedly partners in death. The crimes committed inside 25 Cromwell Street defy comprehension, even decades later. Fred and Rose West allegedly operated with a pattern, one designed to control, isolate, and eliminate. Their method, according to police reports, began with selecting victims who were unlikely to draw immediate attention. Hitchhikers, troubled teens, even lodgers in their home. Once lured inside, often under the promise of work, a place to stay, or sometimes just a hot meal, the doors would close. The atmosphere would shift. The house itself became a weapon. Rooms were modified with hidden locks, peepholes in doors, makeshift soundproofing. According to testimonies, victims were bound, gagged, and left in total darkness for hours, sometimes days. The couple would then allegedly carry out a series of assaults. These acts were not random. They were methodical. Many victims suffered repeated physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. Some were mutilated, others drugged. Fred often used a variety of tools: ropes, masking tape, even surgical instruments, allegedly cataloging his actions with photographs. Rose was reportedly active in the abuse, sometimes alone, sometimes with Fred. In several cases, the abuse ended in death. After the murder, Fred would dismember the bodies, a practice he allegedly began long before meeting Rose. Police believe he buried the remains beneath the house, beneath the garage, and in the garden. Each grave was shallow, each victim bound and marked by signs of prolonged trauma. Among the more disturbing discoveries was the condition of the remains. Some skulls were missing. Others showed evidence of gagging or strangulation. In many cases, tape was still wrapped around the jaw and face, hands bound behind the back with cloth or cord. Heather West's body was located beneath the patio, beneath the very ground where the family hosted barbecues. In total, 12 victims were officially confirmed, though Fred allegedly hinted there were more. Some experts believe the true number could exceed 20. The cellar became a place of particular interest. There, officers found evidence of several grave sites. The room had been repurposed, not just for concealment, but as a chamber of horror. In interviews, Fred allegedly confessed that he used the cellar for what he called special girls, a term that still haunts investigators. When questioned, Fred seemed remorseless. He once said, "She didn't scream, so I carried on." Fred was charged with 12 counts of murder before his death. Rose was charged with 10, including her own daughter. To this day, she denies involvement. The crime spanned over 20 years and remained hidden in plain sight. It was not just a story of murder. It was a story of manipulation, secrecy, and evil carried out behind closed doors. When Heather West disappeared in 1987, Fred and Rose claimed she had gone to live with friends. But over the years, rumors swirled, including whispered confessions from the other West children. By the early 1990s, a report from social services, coupled with persistent concerns from school staff and relatives, finally caught police attention. A warrant was issued in early 1994, initially for a single missing person. But investigators came prepared, with cadaver dogs, forensic experts, and excavation teams. The garden was their first target. As soon as bones were unearthed, the search expanded. Law enforcement cordoned off the house, removing floorboards, digging in the cellar, even dismantling walls. Detectives worked in shifts, day and night. The scale of the operation grew as more remains were uncovered. Each discovery strengthened the case, but it also deepened the horror and the need to act quickly before more evidence was lost. The remains recovered were in varying states of decomposition, some skeletal, others partially preserved. This made identification difficult. In the 1990s, DNA technology was still evolving, so investigators relied heavily on dental records, clothing, personal effects. Bodies had been dismembered, and in some cases, bones were missing entirely. This suggested, according to forensic teams, that Fred may have removed certain body parts intentionally. The basement soil was dense and compacted, which preserved some remains, but made excavation painstaking. Despite these hurdles, 9 victims were identified by mid-1994. Others remain unnamed to this day. Modern forensic techniques have since revisited the evidence, confirming the brutality, but also validating the original findings. The case is now considered one of the most extensive forensic investigations in British history, a reminder of how much can remain hidden until someone dares to dig. As news of the investigation broke, Gloucester was gripped by fear and disbelief. Neighbors who had once passed the West home daily now gathered behind police tape, whispering about what had been hidden beneath their feet. Parents became hypervigilant, watching their children more closely, locking doors at dusk. Some residents held vigils, while others couldn't bear to walk past Cromwell Street again. There were reports of nightmares, anxiety, and lasting trauma among those who had known the West family. What was once just another house on the block was now a symbol of unthinkable darkness. British tabloids dubbed it the House of Horrors, and the headlines came quickly. Photographers camped outside Cromwell Street for weeks, capturing every grim development. Daily news bulletins updated the nation as dismembered remains were pulled from the ground. The story gained international attention, with journalists from Europe, North America, and Australia covering the trial. Some criticized the media frenzy, arguing it sensationalized the suffering of the victims. Others claimed the exposure brought attention to failings in child protection and social services. The house was eventually demolished, but the images and headlines remain etched in public memory. While Fred and Rose West were the only individuals ever charged, speculation has lingered. Fred claimed before his death that others were involved, mentioning unnamed accomplices and even suggesting links to organized rings. Law enforcement investigated these claims, but no substantial evidence ever surfaced. Some theorists believe Fred committed murders earlier than documented, possibly dating back to the early 1960s. The body of Anna McFall, a former lover, was discovered in a field in 1994, with clear signs of dismemberment. Others point to disappearances that match Fred's known patterns, including girls never found. There were also questions about how Rose could not have known or participated given the scale and consistency of the crimes. According to police records, her fingerprints and behaviors painted a disturbing picture, but to this day, no additional suspects have ever been charged. The unanswered question remains: were Fred and Rose truly acting alone? Fred West never stood trial. On January 1st, 1995, while on remand in prison, he took his own life, using a makeshift rope from bed sheets. His final written statement confessed to multiple murders, but lacked specific details. Rose West stood trial later that year. She faced 10 counts of murder, including her own daughter, Heather. The prosecution presented harrowing evidence, including forensic findings, witness testimony from her surviving children, and disturbing journals allegedly kept by Fred. Rose denied all charges, claiming Fred was solely responsible. But on November 22, 1995, the jury returned a unanimous verdict: guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to life imprisonment, with no possibility of parole. The judge described her crimes as appalling and depraved, and her sentence remains one of the most severe issued to a woman in modern British history. To this day, Rose West maintains her innocence. Despite the convictions, many questions remain unanswered. How many victims truly passed through the doors of 25 Cromwell Street? Were there other burial sites? Other names never reported? Other families still waiting for closure? Fred's cryptic statements hinted at more, but no further bodies have been found. And what of Rose, now decades into her life sentence, still insisting on her innocence? The cellar is gone, the house demolished, but the shadows left behind still linger in Gloucester's memory. Perhaps the most haunting mystery is this: how could so many lives be lost, unnoticed, for so long? The West case led to sweeping changes in how missing persons and abuse cases were handled in the United Kingdom. Safeguards were improved in social services. Schools became more alert to signs of domestic abuse, and interagency communication was strengthened. The home on Cromwell Street was razed in 1996, the lot now empty. But the story remains a warning, a case studied in criminology, psychology, and forensic science programs worldwide. It stands as a grim reminder that evil can wear a smile and hide in plain sight. As we close the file on Fred and Rose West, a British horror story, we leave you with our clue once more. What role did the cellar play in this disturbing tale? Let us know in the comments below. As always, stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay safe.